From what you're seeing, what's happening in Indianapolis?
Right now, it's frustration, and unfortunately, it's boiling over, and it's being seen. It's one thing to have it behind closed doors, but when it spills over, and when the coach has to basically say, "Hey, you know what, Caitlin? Enough is enough. This is too disruptive." In and out. Take a seat. What do you think?
I agree. I think it's frustration. I'm not like the best lip reader, but I feel like StephanieWhite did say defense a couple times.
Now, I made the video and I said, StephanieWhite said, "Get the F out my face." If you guys read her lips, she definitely swerved at Caitlin, like cursed at her, bro. It looked that way. Now, I could be wrong. I very much could be wrong. But it definitely looked like she's cursing at CaitlinClark, scolding her almost like she's a damn child. And if I'm CaitlinClark, mom, I am pissed. I am pissed. I damn near want to have a conversation with Kelly off the record. Don't you ever talk to my daughter like that. If I'm Mr. Clark, don't you ever in your mind think about you finna talk to mine.
The speed at which a professional franchise's internal collapse becomes national headline news, that speed is the story. For weeks, the paper trail on the Indiana Fever lived right here. The CBA violations, the contradictory press conferences, the rotation disasters, the sideline footage. This week, that paper trail became a bonfire. When Cheryl Miller sits down on ESPN and pulls zero punches, this is no longer a debate among hardcore fans. This is prime time. This is mainstream America tuning in. And the Indiana Fever front office? They have officially lost control of the narrative. Let's get into it. Welcome back to WNBA Action. Today, we're breaking down the most explosive single week of organizational exposure this entire season has produced, in order with receipts and nothing left out. Cheryl Miller on ESPN and what her willingness to go public tells us about the temperature inside the league. The front office's social media behavior and what it reveals about a crisis management team that is completely out of its depth. The bench footage that forced the national cameras to pay attention. The defensive isolation blueprint that ESPN's crew put on blast, and the roster construction failure that Jason Whitlock just dropped into the mainstream conversation. Every one of these elements is documented, and together, they form the most damning week-long indictment of a franchise structure we have seen all season. They are in trouble today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if they lose Thursday, expect the full force of Fox, ESPN, and every major outlet to descend on Indianapolis. And it's already starting because Cheryl Miller went on ESPN and did not hold back. People have been calling for Cheryl Miller to coach this team. Now we've got Sue Bird getting involved too. And that combination, that is not an accident.
Today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if they lose on Thursday, expect a big time going in from major networks. I'm talking Fox, ESPN, and it's already starting today because Cheryl Miller went on ESPN and she ain't hold nothing back. People been saying that they want Cheryl Miller to be the coach of the Fever. And we got Sue Bird getting in on the action as well. Not only that, we got
Cheryl Miller choosing to speak publicly about the Indiana Fever on national television is not routine media commentary. Understand what Miller is in this sport. She is a player, a coach, a broadcaster, and most importantly, a figure whose credibility is not attached to any current organizational relationship that would give her a reason to stay quiet. When someone with that standing goes on ESPN and calls out a franchise's dysfunction directly, that tells you something very specific about the internal consensus that is formed among the people who know this sport the best. People at that level do not walk into unnecessary friction without a threshold of conviction that makes the exposure worth it. Her decision to speak is itself information. It tells you exactly where the league's most informed voices have landed on this situation. Now, the fan reaction calling for Miller to coach? Emotionally understandable. But analytically, her significance here does not depend on any future role she may or may not take. What matters is what her public characterization communicates about how wide the accountability consensus around this franchise has now become. Sue Bird entering the conversation extends that consensus into a second institutional lane entirely. Bird's post-playing platform gives her both the credibility and the independence to speak on organizational dysfunction without the guardrails that current players and league employees have to navigate. Two figures of that caliber, same franchise, same week, is a qualitative shift in the scrutiny this organization is under. This is not a week ago. This is a different level.
Or two ago, Amber need to do what Kelly did at this point, and that's leave the internet. If you can't stand in the kitchen, get out. It's too hot for you. The oven might burn your hand. That's how hot it is. And last summer in July, it was too hot for Kelly, and Kelly ain't been back on Twitter since. Kelly, I don't even think Kelly got an Instagram no more. I mean, Kelly is gone. She might not even have Facebook. That's how bad the heat had got for her last.
Amber needs to do what Kelly did, get completely off the internet. If you can't handle the kitchen right now, get out. Because that oven will burn you. Last summer in July, it got too hot for Kelly. And Kelly has not been back on Twitter acting reckless since. I don't even think she has Instagram anymore. She is gone. Gone. That's how bad the heat got for her.
You know, Kelsey Mitchell kind of chimed in and said, like, you need to go stand over here and let us just, like, you know, regain the calm and huddle. When it becomes that disruptive to the entire team, somebody has to step in.
Well, that's my question for both of you, because you've played on teams where they're high.
So Kelsey Mitchell definitely got in on it, told her to go stand over there. Bro, what? Kayla need to get the hell out of Indy, bro.
Expectations, you know what that pressure can be like. Are these moments actually impacting their...
Amber Cox's documented blocking of Jason Whitlock and other media personalities covering this story needs to be examined as an organizational crisis management decision, not a personal social media preference. When a professional sports executive, one who is currently the subject of national broadcast coverage about her franchise's dysfunction, uses her publicly associated accounts to block the journalists documenting that dysfunction, that action sends a specific message to every stakeholder watching. It communicates that the organization's response to critical coverage is to restrict reach rather than address substance. It communicates that the executive doing the blocking has concluded that the criticism cannot be corrected with facts, because factual correction, when available, is always the superior response to inaccurate reporting. And it communicates an organizational posture toward accountability that is entirely consistent with the press conference deflections, the reporting compliance failures, and the statement management patterns this channel has tracked all season long. Cox is now replicating the exact documented pattern of a Fever executive retreating from public digital presence under media pressure. This is not a personality coincidence. This is an organizational culture pattern. Organizations where leadership responds to accountability by restricting rather than engaging produce this behavior consistently because the culture permits it and implicitly rewards it. The blocking conduct is a symptom of an institution that has never built the capacity for the kind of transparent public accountability that professional sports at this commercial level demands.
Man, y'all gotta go look at it. So then he went on to say, these four women put the alphabet mafia agenda above basketball business. Your personal life should be your personal life. It should not be your business. These four women think fans are watching and paying thousands of dollars for tickets to see them, not CaitlinClark. That's a problem. Exactly, bro. Those four women are the culprit behind what we're seeing take place in Indianapolis. And what's crazy is that court size tickets is like $2-3 grand right now. Like, I ain't gonna lie to you, bro. I've been looking. They're like $2-3 grand.
What we're seeing in Indianapolis right now is frustration, and it is boiling over in public. It is one thing to keep it behind closed doors. It is another thing entirely when the coach has to turn to CaitlinClark on the bench and say, enough, sit down, enough, you're disrupting this team. Now, I am not the best lip reader on the planet, but StephanieWhite said defense at least twice in that interaction. And the footage is right there. ESPN framing this season as a 4-2 start followed by consecutive losses culminating in a 16-point blowout loss to a first-year expansion franchise. That is the narrative structure that casual national sports fans are now receiving as their first introduction to this team and this organization. The 4-2 start matters because it establishes the talent is there. The collapse matters because it establishes that talent alone cannot overcome the structural and organizational failures producing this losing streak. Talent present, structure broken, losses mounting. That is the analytically accurate characterization of what the game film shows, and it is now the lens through which tens of millions of casual sports fans are processing the Indiana Fever season. The front office cannot manage that narrative through press conferences or blocking journalists. The only path out is results and documented behavioral change. Neither is currently visible. The lip-reading interpretation of White's sideline communication with Clark requires precision and restraint. Lip-reading from broadcast footage is not a reliable evidentiary standard. What can be documented without uncertainty is the visual character of the interaction, the physical proximity, the visible emotional intensity of the coaching staff's communication posture, and Clark's visible response. Those elements are in the footage for anyone to see. The specific words are not confirmable from available visual evidence, and responsible analysis does not present unconfirmable interpretations as established fact. What the footage does document, reliably and without interpretive doubt, is a sideline interaction whose visual character is fully consistent with a pattern of coaching staff Clark interactions that have been captured across multiple games this season. The pattern is what matters analytically. Individual interactions are expressions of that pattern. I made a video saying StephanieWhite told Clark to get out of her face. I read her lips. She absolutely went at Caitlin, cursed at her. I could be wrong. I very much could be wrong, but it looked exactly like she was scolding her like a child. And if I am CaitlinClark, I am furious. And if I am her father, I am requesting a conversation with Kelly Cox. Off the record, right now. Do not ever speak to my daughter like that. Ever. The characterization of White's communication posture toward Clark, independent entirely of specific words, raises a workplace conduct question that Fever ownership is institutionally obligated to evaluate. Professional sports franchises are workplaces. The standards governing how coaching staff communicate with players are not categorically different from the standards governing how managers communicate with employees in any professional environment. When that communication is visually documented across multiple occasions in a manner that a reasonable observer would characterize as inappropriate in terms of proximity, intensity, and visible emotional dysregulation, the organization employing both parties has a documented obligation to act. The ownership group has seen the same footage the national audience has seen. What they do with it, or fail to do, is itself a documented organizational choice that will be part of this record. Kelsey Mitchell stepped in, told Clark to go stand over there, let the team regroup. When it becomes that disruptive to the entire bench, somebody has to intervene. And the fact that it was a teammate and not the coaching staff who did it, that is the detail that tells you everything you need to know about the internal dynamic on this roster right now. The reported Mitchell bench interaction, directing Clark away from the confrontation rather than toward it, requires the same evidentiary restraint as the lip-reading question. Specific bench conversation content during live game situations is not confirmable from broadcast footage alone. But the broader team dynamic question that the reported interaction surfaces is entirely real and analytically significant. The competitive cohesion of a professional basketball roster, the trust architecture that produces collective defensive commitment, transition execution, and late-game decision-making, is directly and measurably affected by the visibility and management of internal friction. When bench interactions between teammates are being interpreted nationally as expressions of internal division, the team's competitive cohesion has a documented external perception problem regardless of what was actually said. Managing that perception, and the underlying reality it may or may not reflect, is a coaching staff and front office responsibility. The current organizational record suggests it is not being effectively executed. The defensive isolation exploitation that ESPN's crew identified is the dimension of this situation with the most direct and actionable competitive implication. The pattern is documentable. Opposing teams identified that Clark can be targeted in isolation situations to generate foul trouble and physical fatigue. Golden State's Valkyries were the first to execute this blueprint systematically. It has since been adopted league-wide because the game film is available to every single coaching staff in the WNBA. Clark's foul trouble across multiple recent games, including the 5-foul night in Portland, is not coincidental. It is the predictable outcome of a targeted strategy that the Fever's coaching staff has not yet developed a consistent counter to. The counter requires two things entirely within the coaching staff's design authority. First, off-ball screening action that changes Clark's catch points, receiving the ball in motion off screens rather than standing stationary as an isolation target. Second, rotational defensive support that reduces her one-on-one exposure in the specific situations where isolation targeting is occurring. Both of these are system design decisions. Neither requires personnel the Fever do not already have. What they require is a coaching staff that has diagnosed the opponent's blueprint and designed a specific, repeatable response to it. The absence of that response across multiple games is the analytical indictment. Full stop. These four women put the alphabet mafia agenda above basketball business. Your personal life should stay personal. It should not be your business strategy. These four women seem to believe that fans are paying thousands of dollars to see them, not CaitlinClark. And that is a fundamental problem. Those four women are the culprit behind everything we are watching unfold in Indianapolis. And courtside tickets right now? $2,000–$3,000. I have been looking. They are real. $2,000 to $3,000. Whitlock's roster construction critique, the $800,000 Monique Billings commitment specifically, is now in the national mainstream and deserves examination on its specific merits. Billings was brought in as an interior presence the Fever's roster construction identified as a need. Her documented production, 8 minutes of limited impact in the most recent game, has not validated that identification in competitive terms. The gap between resource commitment and production output is a front office evaluation question that does not have a comfortable answer. The broader roster construction critique, that the off-season investment did not produce the personnel complement that Clark's play style requires to be maximally effective, is analytically supportable directly from game film. The secondary creation deficit. The off-ball movement limitations. The interior screen setting consistency that pick-and-roll execution demands. These are roster construction variables the off-season decisions did not fully address. Whitlock's characterization of the offseason as a wasted opportunity is consistent with what the game film shows about this roster's structural limitations. His framing of the organizational priority question, executives who have elevated their own decision-making visibility above the competitive product, is the sharpest version of an accountability argument that the documented record fully supports. The commercial reality is precise, and it should not be understated. Courtside tickets in Indianapolis command $2,000 to $3,000 specifically because of the player those tickets allow people to watch. Every organizational decision that degrades Clark's institutional situation, her health, her competitive environment, her extension outlook, that decision degrades the